Oh, I didn't have to ask for permission that time.
Oh, nice.
All right. You ready?
Do it.
All right. Welcome to Essential Coaching Conversations with Kyle and Asim.
The real, relevant, necessary conversations to help you navigate coaching, teaching, learning, and life.
Know what episode this is, Kyle. I didn't look ahead of time. I don't think you looked ahead of time. I think it might be number 31 in season 2. Either way, it's been a while since we've been in the pod lab. We are trying something new today. We are trying a new technology, so we're going to see how that turns out. If we don't get the recording and nobody hears this except the two of us, Kyle, I'm going to let you know you sound really, really good.
I
Uh,
appreciate that. It's
in
coming
the
in clear your way
you
too.
did. Great,
This could
great.
be a good thing. We'll
It
find
could be a
out.
good thing, or nobody could ever hear this, and that would be fine too.
Yeah.
But we are coming at you right after, the American Thanksgiving week, and found some time here in early December to just jump on and really just use this as a chance to catch up and talk about what's been going on, but also like throw some new things against the wall and see what sticks. I am hopeful that our listening audience finds value in what we're going to talk about today. It is a fairly reflective thing for us to be able to jump on here and recount some of the conversations that we've had recently with our EC fam and kind of people around the country that, 4 years after starting essential coaching and being in the space of helping coaches and senior leadership around the country figure out how to do things better. Um, it's been really cool to have some of the conversations we've had these last couple weeks with folks in our orbit. But Kyle, I'm going to throw it to you. Just what's going on, man? How are you?
Man, doing well. We got through football season, so our fall seasons have wrapped up, and now transitioning into basketball. And so, again, with having a new crew and me in this role and expanded departments and all this reshuffling, it's just, man, it's a constant learning experience and constant state of reflection, and what you want to do well, and already projecting next year's football season and what would we do differently and what can we do better and what went well that we want to keep. And we're in the middle of basketball or getting that started, but yet we're already starting to focus on baseball and softball and tennis and things like that in the spring. And so it's just this sort of weird limbo in the middle where everything is up in the air, and it's hard to prioritize and make sure that everything is kind of moving smoothly, but nothing's getting left behind. And so it's going well. I've got a really great team around me, and so I'm always very thankful for them. That was a big piece of reflection and gratitude last week during the Thanksgiving week, and just thinking about how good we've got it now with our staff and people around us. And so things have been good there. Personally, I'm out of shape and I'm getting older, and staring down the barrel of 40 in about 4 months. And so I'm trying to work out more and kind of getting back at it and working out in the mornings, and got a great little routine with our family at the house. And so that's been really good, trying to read more. And, things are so chaotic in the fall, and you get a chance to take a breath and think, okay, what do I need to do to improve on myself? We talk about leading ourselves first a lot. And I actually got to run into J Rob, my old college band director. And, if you've listened to us and you've known us, he's the person that is responsible for the "rest is music too" phrase, and has given me tons of really great life lessons over the years as a director. And so when I got to run into him a couple of times during the end of football season, that forced me to take some stock and reflect and think about a few things. And so trying to work on being a little healthier, taking care of myself and all of those kinds of things. So and then right now also it's Chuck Challenge season. So I figured I'd go ahead and throw that out there. I'm wearing my green Chucks right now. I'm drinking coffee from my Chuck Taylor mug. Those of you that have paid attention to us and listened to us, you might be familiar with the Chucks Challenge. It's going on 6 years now. Again, today actually is the 25th anniversary of the wreck. I lost a friend due to a drunk driving accident. And he always wore Chuck Taylors. And so we all bought some, and it's just been a way to remember him and share his story and just the dangers and the perils and the consequences of a controllable, senseless act like drunk driving. And so years ago, I would coach a game in Chuck Taylor's. I got out of coaching. You graciously surrogated for me, if that's a word, and coached in Chucks. And we thought, you know what? Why is it just the two of us? Let's expand this thing. And so for the last 6 years, we've been asking coaches, and we've had coaches in a dozen plus countries, 40 plus of the 50 continental United States, have all coached or taught a class or gone to a meeting or run a jewelry store or something like that in a pair of Chuck Taylors and been able to share that with us. So it's Chuck's week, it's Chuck's month. And so that's going strong as well. So if anybody out there is interested in learning more, we've got an episode that we did previously. Maybe we can throw relink that show in this show's notes, but love to see everybody supporting and just, again, sharing the story and making sure that you're taking care of yourselves, but taking care of each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even about the Chuck's Challenge, like last year, when I was coaching at Worcester Academy, parents jumped in on it. Like I sent emails to all the parents and all the kids, and like they were wearing them to school, and parents wore them to the games. Like it really has caught fire, and I'm hopeful we can get that message out again because it is so important, especially around this time, like with late Thanksgiving and then Christmas being 3 weeks from today. Like there's gonna be a lot of parties. There's a lot of social gatherings, and this being in athletics. Like I don't know if it's the same in Division One. I think it is, but like even in Division Three, like there's a major alcohol culture in Division Three, and everything revolves around the kids are off campus now. We can drink, and it's like, all right, well, what's your plan for getting home, right? What's your plan for getting back to the people that love you? And the thing that actually like is the most poignant to me, and this is what I remember the most in terms of not just drunk driving, but like the Chuck's Challenge and like how important this message is. There's an ad, and Kyle, I'm sure you've seen it, but the tagline to the ad is, "Your dog won't know why you didn't come home." And I don't know if I've mentioned that on the Chuck's episode that we did a while back. That was what, episode 19 of
It's
the podcast.
been a while.
Been a long time. But I think that's like, you may make it home, but somebody may not because you make a bad decision.
Yep.
And so just really reiterating the Chuck's Challenge and like, I've got my Chucks up in the closet. I'll wear them at some point to go do something. But yeah, if you participate, please do send us pictures of it. You can tweet it to us, you can DM it, you can text it, you can email it. Our email address is admin, so ADMIN at essential-coaching.net. Feel free to shoot us an email there of you or your team or your staff or whatever wearing your Chucks. To show solidarity in the fight against drunk driving. It is a totally preventable thing, right? There are a lot of things in life that are not preventable, right? Elimination of drunk driving and even buzzed driving, that is 100% preventable. And it's really about making the next best decision. And that's what we always talk about, right? Is making the next best decision is the whole goal of life. So let's make the next best decision, wear your Chucks, and let's save some lives for sure. Kyle, let's talk about the heating the cheese best thing you saw. And I know you have a real special one, so I'm actually gonna go on mute. You got it, brother.
I do. I'm actually gonna best thing I've seen recently. I'm actually gonna shout out Kendall Kavanaugh, my little 8-year-old, well, 8.5-year-old, almost 9-year-old now in February. My daughter, she's started 3rd grade this year, and for those of you that have kids and had kids go through 3rd grade's a really big leap. Pre-K, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, they treat them like babies because they are babies. And for whatever reason, and I won't go into the reasons why I don't love all this, but they grow them up real fast when they hit 3rd grade, especially when it comes to homework and responsibility, and the math changes quite a bit. And you know, Asim, we've joked about this in our Thursday night chat. Like, I don't know third grade math now. I knew it in third grade, but I don't get it now. I'm having to relearn it because it's all different and new. And you know, and the teachers back at parent night, they did everything they could to try to calm parents' fears of, hey, don't reach out to us every time your kid misses a problem or they get a B or a C or they fail a test or whatever. You know, they're not perfect. You know, we have to kind of get that into our heads that our kids aren't perfect, even though we may see them as such. But they're going to struggle a little bit, and they should, and that's good, right? Like we want our kids to struggle, especially in a controlled environment where it's a safe environment to struggle and fail and learn some of these lessons. Now, again, they're 8, 9 years old, so it's got to be done in kind of the right way and right fashion. But she's very blessed with some really good teachers. She's got a great friend group. And Kendall, if you've ever met her, if you know her, everybody's goal in life is to get Kendall to talk to him because she just won't do it. She's just a shy. And I'll say this, she gets pegged as shy. She's aware. She has very great emotional self-awareness. And so if she's not talking to you, she doesn't want to, you know, she doesn't know you well enough or something like that. And so
I can vouch for this, that she has been on Zoom several times and you're like, hey, say hi to Uncle Asim, and she'll look at the screen and be like, nah, I'm good.
nah, but then she'll talk about you for 10 minutes, like off air, you know, and
Right,
then like,
right.
so she knows what's going on, but it's like, she kind of decides when she wants to jump into a moment and when she doesn't. And I actually think that's a really great thing. I think it's a sign of emotional maturity and intelligence and agility and all those things. But anyway, she really has kind of come out of her shell recently. And I've had a number of her teachers and faculty and staff, just even in Carline, being like, oh man, Kendall's grown up so much. You know, she'll start a conversation with me now. You know, she'll do this, she'll do that. And she's done so well in math and handling things. But it's not even the best thing I've seen is not even like the grades that she brings home. It's her establishing her own little independent routine. And we come home and we do homework, and she, you know, there are nights where we just don't have it, and she's like, Daddy, I don't want to do this, can we do it in the morning? It's like, you know what, great. If you're taking stock to know that this isn't going to happen tonight, or you don't want to read and we can do it in the morning, that is a-okay when your brain is fresh. And we study spelling words every morning in the car, you know, those kinds of things. But the best thing has been her waking up, she makes her lunch, she gets dressed. We don't have to worry about any of that kind of stuff with her. It might be a question here or there, or can you grab me this, or can you help me with, you know, my water bottle or whatever. And she's like, Daddy, I want to get to school earlier. Like, you got to get up. Like, let's go. She's pulling me out of bed. Go get your workout in. Like, we got to go. I'm ready to get to school. And it's been really neat to see her little personality and her as a little person grow up, but knowing the mental leap of what third grade can be, and just how well she's handled all of that and been mature and all that. And of course, you know, they could all come crashing down tomorrow. We you know, so we want to take stock of it. But you go on a break, you get out of your routine for Thanksgiving, and she'll still get nervous about going to school from time to time. But, you know, so in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, here we go. We're going to have to kind of start all this, reteach all this on Monday. But she picked it right back up. You know, she's back into it. And so that's been really cool to see her developing some independence and maturity and kind of, I do it myself, daddy. And just kind of handling her business, you know, her job of the day for whatever that is as an 9-year-old, just seeing her crush it. So that's been pretty cool.
How many adults would be able to jump back into that routine? Man, it's Wednesday and like I'm not even in that routine, right?
I was telling somebody that the other day. I think it was our dance coach, Caroline, and was just kind of bragging on her a little bit and talking about it. She was like, shoot, she got it more together than I do. You know, like, I'm struggling to wake up and get dressed and work out and go do all these things. She was like, I was late to work today. So yeah. And I think that's, I don't know, just as a parent, that's cool to see, knowing that she's got it a little bit more together than I do, you know, or Megan does sometimes. Yeah. So we all struggle with it, but she's been rocking it. So proud of her.
No, she's awesome. And like, you know, what's crazy is like you and I now, we've been friends for what, like 7-ish years almost.
Mhm.
And I remember when she was like a little one, right? And to see her even from afar grow up and like hear the stories that you tell about her, it's just awesome, right? Like
Sure.
that's what you want as a parent and even as a mentor for young people, is to like see them thrive and see them become independent like she is. And like, I was making my whole family's lunches at like 8 years old, but for her to get up and just go make hers in the morning, like,
Big deal, man.
big deal, right? Like a lot of kids are like relying on somebody else to do that stuff. So you extrapolate that out when she's our age, right? Like she's fiercely independent, like
Mhm.
self-sufficient human being.
That's the
Um,
goal, man.
yeah, and like you and I both know a lot of adults who are not able to do that, that are
Yeah.
our age, who are not self-sufficient, stable adults. Like I think it's awesome, right? So no, that is the good feeling, good news. Heat the cheese. She's heating the cheese in her
She
own life.
she is heating the cheese and packing it in her lunch as well. So that's we gotta get her to eat more protein. She's a very picky eater. She's a very
Sure.
carb heavy little girl. So
See, she and I have a lot in common, man.
we need a little bit more plate discipline, when it comes to what she's putting in her lunch, but the fact that she's doing it, is pretty cool.
No, that's
What about
awesome,
you?
man.
What have you seen?
Yeah, so we I have lived, or we have lived up here now since 2019. We bought our house in 2021. And a little bit of backstory, we got really, really lucky with being able to buy a home where we live. We live in a very working class neighborhood, right? A lot of diversity in our neighborhood. A lot of folks, like you hear work trucks. 5:30 in the morning, you hear work trucks firing up for the day. And when we were walking around the neighborhood, when we first were looking at this house, we ran into our neighbor. Her name is Lori, and she lives across the street. And she was walking her little dog. And of course, like when my wife and I see a dog, the world stops. Like we have to say hello to the dog. We pointed out, we make up a story about the dog, all of these things, right? So we got to talking to Lori, and this was like um, a week before we put in, or maybe a couple days before we put in our bid for the house. And she just came across as so genuine, and like she's an older lady. Her husband he's from Africa, and he and I are a lot alike. Like he's Southeast Asian as well. And what she was talking about, loving the neighborhood, and like she's lived here for 30 years and all of this stuff, right? So fast forward to this past week, my wife and I went out of town. We went up to New Hampshire for the week, or from Wednesday to Sunday. And I had put a sign on the door just for any of like the UPS drivers, USPS, FedEx, whatever, that said, please deliver all packages to the side door, just so they wouldn't be visible from the street. And our neighbor, walking her little dog, saw the sign on the door and texted my wife and said, hey, I saw your sign on the door. Do you want me to pick up your packages and keep them in our shed for you, so that, they don't get rained on, they don't get snowed on,
Mhm.
and nobody takes them or whatever? And we were like, oh my God, of course. Like, you don't have to do that, but if you're willing, like, we'd really appreciate that. So we're sitting in the cabin at in New Hampshire, which, by the way, on Thanksgiving Day got like 8 inches of snow. The power went out while we were cooking dinner. So like we had some sides that we had prepared ahead of time, so at least we had something to eat on Thanksgiving night.
Wow.
And then the power came back on around, like, I think it was like at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. It startled everybody. Like the fan from the stove had gone off, and like then that pops back on. Anyway, so I get an alert on my phone from our Ring doorbell, and I like watching it. Like sometimes I know that it's just like somebody walked by and it alerts us, but this one was like, there's somebody at your door. So I open it, and here's Lori, right? She's like in her 60s with her little dog, and she is reaching for a package on our front stoop. And she's like talking to her little dog. She's like, come on, Daisy, let's go. Come on, cooperate with me. And like a very, very just like salt of the earth human being who's just like a neighbor helping a neighbor. And I was just like, I was so grateful that that Ring alert wasn't some porch pirate coming and taking our stuff,
Yeah.
right? And that she, in the middle of the night, went out, grabbed it, and when we got back, she texted my wife, or I don't remember how the conversation ended up starting, but She was like, "Oh yeah, we put it over by, under our grills so it wouldn't get wet. Feel free to come and grab it. No harm, no foul. Appreciate it, right?" And I just think living in the neighborhood that we live in, one of our other neighbors has gone downhill really fast with dementia. And just like knowing that, like, I went out of my way to buy a snowblower so I could snow blow and not have to shovel our walkway and theirs. And like just making sure that our neighbors know that like we're here to help them out. They're here to help us out. And like, I don't know, that was the best thing I saw over the last couple weeks was just like the humanity in our neighborhood
Mhm.
where people are willing to help you with no expectation of return, right? So like this woman Lori, her husband Muhammad, he had heart surgery last year, and I remember like reaching out to them, being like, "Hey, what do you need from us?" Right? Like she's like, "We don't need food or anything," but it was in the winter, and winters up here in Rhode Island are brutal. So when it snowed, right, like going over, shoveling their walk, making sure that she could get out to go to work. He
Right.
doesn't work anymore. And then like we had a neighbor down the street, his house got broken into, and like we rallied around them. And like it's just, it was really cool. It's really cool to live in a community like that, especially being a transplant to this area, because a lot of the people that have lived here, a lot of the people that live here have lived here for a long time.
Yeah.
That's just like a New England thing, right? Like people don't leave. And like she's lived there for 30 years. The people next door to her just moved after that house being in their family for 50 plus years. um, our neighbor with dementia, like he built the house that they live in 40, 50 years ago, right? With his dad or something, like, I don't know. So anyway, being a transplant to the area, people are willing to take care of you and you take care of them. Like that was a really cool experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds like a little Southern hospitality up in Rhode Island. That's
A
good to
little
hear.
bit. I have found too, like this is maybe a separate conversation, but having lived in the South, having lived in Oklahoma, which some would consider the South, some say it's the Midwest, it's the Great Plains, whatever. I think humanity is humanity, man. Like if you are a decent human being, this shouldn't be out of the ordinary,
Right. Good
right?
point.
It shouldn't be out of the ordinary to pick up your neighbor's packages when they go out of town. Or, I remember like when I was growing up in Virginia, like we didn't need to put a stop on the mail. Like I'm not even sure our younger audience would even know what that means, right? Where you would go to because you could do this shit online. Like you had to go to the post office and tell them, hey, from December 14th to December 28th, we don't want to receive our mail. Could you please hold it here?
Mhm.
And we'll come and pick it up. Or you can have the mail person, give it to us. Right. I remember growing up, like our neighbors would just collect our mail, or we would collect their mail. We would put it in a brown paper grocery bag, and then when we saw them pull in, we would give them like a half an hour or 45 minutes, and then like go ring their doorbell and drop it off on their
Here you
stoop,
go. Yeah.
right? And like, here's your mail. Hope you did, and like you usually brought something back for that person, and like that's just kind of how your neighborhood functioned. And then that happened my whole life, and I'm glad that we have that here now, right? Where like
Sure.
at least in our immediate vicinity, those people are a lot like the people that I remember growing up with. Again, in a very working class neighborhood, um, right next to the school, right? And like we all looked out for each other's kids, and like we knew who was who. Anyway, I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but I do think that there is something to that where in your insular community, you can still operate that way.
No doubt. Yeah. And I think it's a great point and a great timely point coming off of this, this holiday season and Thanksgiving and Christmas, and holidays can be hard for a lot of people a lot of times, especially if you've lost somebody or you're alone, or, you just, you know, childhood trauma of
No
holidays or
doubt.
anything like that. Like it's real for a lot of people. And, community and that word family gets moved around a lot. But I think a lot of times when we hear the word family, we really think community. And just really, really great time to kind of think and reflect on that. And a great time to kind of maybe take stock of where you are and reflect on what the community is around you, and maybe where you can input yourself and heat some cheese for somebody, or just do something, a random act of kindness. Just do something nice. the old lady pushed the grocery cart back to the, back to the car, anything like that, opening the door. And, it's funny you say that, because we'll get, Walmart delivery, or there'll be a package that shows up, and, Kendall being 8, it's like, oh, stranger danger, like, oh my
Right.
gosh, somebody's here. I'm going to jump behind the couch and like peek over and like make sure that they're out of the driveway before you go to the door. And, when we were little, like people wouldn't even know, they just busting in your house. And it's like, all right, coffee's on, let's get some
Yeah.
pie out,
Right. Right.
so-and-so just, you didn't give anybody a heads up. You just walked over, and might be at Papa and Nana's house shelling peas, and somebody would walk in and you just hand them a bucket and they would start shelling peas too.
Right.
Let me go, we'll make some more coffee, or we got tea on, or something like that. And so it's interesting how like that has in some ways probably devolved,
Mm-hmm.
but the community aspect and the human component being undefeated, is always going to be there. And so that kind of that those connections and things makes me think about some of these conversations that we've had recently with some of our EC fam. We got a chance to talk with Adrian Lewis, coaching at South Salem High School in Oregon, which is where our good buddy Kip is now coaching as well. So that's a small world,
And
cool
small
thing.
world connection. Kip coached Adrian.
I had no idea.
Kip coached Adrian. Oh yeah.
And now they're coworkers.
Oh yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Oh
That's
yeah.
fantastic, man. So yeah, we got a chance to meet up with him, and we can dive into a little bit of that conversation if you want to. But then also got a chance to speak with another Thursday night OG Layden, his class of junior, senior high school kids. Got a chance to Zoom with them in this leadership class that he teaches, which I think is awesome that he gets to have a class like that, that there's a space for young kids to get to talk about these kind of things. But I went on there and spent, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, 30, 40 minutes just talking about connections and relationships, and, kind of just some of my experiences and where life has all taken me, and how just sort of this common theme of, I'm not doing what I thought I would be doing. I've been bounced and passed around so much in all these different areas. But what you learn through all of that is that the end of the day, the human component is there, and it's undefeated. And it's all about recruiting, connections, people, relationships. The job title changes, but the job stays the same. And I actually got to have a conversation with some of our staff at Louisiana Tech, Wyatt Olson, who's our associate AD for internal ops, who I'm actually trying to get to come on the pod. He's got some really great thoughts and things on people transitioning into adulthood and civilian life after college and out of athletics, and would love trying to get him to come on and to dive into some of that work. But I went by and talked to his staff yesterday about some like purpose and, where are you trying to head in life? And so it's been kind of neat to get to have a number of these conversations lately and recently. And even while reflecting on all of those conversations with Adrian, who's a girls basketball coach and trying to get his season going and who his captains are going to be, to Layden's high school class taking leadership, to, internal ops at Louisiana Tech in Ruston, Louisiana. Again, the common theme among all of these conversations and a lot of these questions, the answers typically come back to, recruiting everyone every day, and the human component. And so I don't really know where I'm going with this, Asim. Just we're kind of having this spaghetti episode, throwing things against the wall. But, that's been something else that I've noticed recently and lately, that no matter where we go or who we are speaking to, all this stuff tends to come back to the same thing fundamentally.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes back fundamentally because it is the fundamental of what we're trying to do, right? And so I can equate this a little bit to the conversation that we had in the chat for the last however many, like 3 months, right, of fake fundamentals, and the idea that you have to have the fundamentals before you can do anything else. And it's like, yeah, okay, that may be true, but the baseline level of any of this stuff, whether it's leadership, it's transitioning out of athletics, it is talking with Adrian. I have on my list too the email from Greg Sadler, who's one of our ECOGs from way back when.
Great. Yeah.
Right, of like this person saying, oh, hey, I'm coaching again. I'm going to wear my Chucks in December, or like 2 weeks from today, he's be wearing his Chucks for their first game.
Yeah.
And the best time in his coaching career was the time spent with us. Right. And like the fundamental of this is all about that connection piece. And like, I don't necessarily think anymore that this is even a spaghetti against the wall episode, right? This has turned into, hey, it's just past Thanksgiving. We're 3 weeks before Christmas, 4 weeks before New Year's. How do we take the lessons that we've learned and go back to basics, right? And like we see these press conferences with coaches all the time, and they're like, we got to get back to basics. We got to get back to basics. Like Dan Hurley, right? Like saying he's never going to play in an MTE ever again. Like we get, home and homes only, whatever. Like we got to get back to basics. We went 0-3, and it's like, the basics are probably the lack of connection that your team has right now. Right? The basics might be whatever you think they are fundamentally, but the real fundamental foundation of any of this stuff. And let's take Layden's class, for example. Like, how many of them do you think heard from anybody else in their life that the foundation is the human component and recruiting everyone every day? Right? They probably maybe heard that in some like circumlocuted fashion, but I would venture a guess, and I'm not a betting person, but if I was, I would bet the majority of the things that they know about leadership, the majority of the things that they know about influencing other people comes right out of a book that's like, hey, here are 10 tips of how to be a better leader. And it's like commanding the room and, like whatever. And it's like, no, that might be part of it, but fundamentally it is about having a connection with the people that you're leading. Right? Nobody's going to respond to you, or they may not respond to you as well unless you have that connection with them. Which is why I think like, our former profession of teaching is one of the ultimate forms of leadership. Right? Your influence on your class, your influence on your coworkers, your influence on the vibe of the school, that is leadership. And if we started to treat it that way, my guess is there would be more attention paid to, hey, we got to pay these folks like leaders, right? And so I think in that way, when you talked to Layden's class, that may have been the first time they ever heard that message. Or Layden probably teed it up for them. And this is often what happens with a guest speaker, right? Layden might have teed it up for them, and they've talked about all of this stuff before, and his students may be all on board with it, but there's probably somebody in that room that's like, okay, whatever.
Sure.
And then they hear, senior associate AD at a Division I school saying the exact same thing. That might resonate differently for that person. But it was Layden's leadership,
right,
in the leadership class of influencing that room to say, hey, no, like this is literally what this is about. And so I think that it comes back to that fundamental, because that is the foundational fundamental for everything in life. Whether that's picking up your neighbor's packages, whether that is, teaching your daughter to be self-sufficient and like packing her own lunch and getting after it in the morning, whether that is, you and your wife's relationship, mine and my wife's relationship, the relationships at work, the interview process, all of that stuff comes back to that one foundational thing that if you can master that, you can go do anything and you can go be anything. And we just like all the other stuff, to me, especially now, like in this process of becoming more essential over the last 4 years, like, or really the last 7 years, like I don't need a lot of that other stuff. I'm going to figure all the other stuff out. But if we don't have this part of the aligned effort to be the most connected team in the country, or, in what we do, the rest of the stuff really doesn't matter to me, at least.
Yeah. So 2 things. You mentioned Hurley. Since we're 2 former basketball coaches, let's talk about this big elephant in the room, of UConn going 0-3 in Maui. And there was one of the quotes from one of the press conferences was, I think we're going to be fine offensively, but defense was horrid. And when you think about like these similar themes, like why is offense typically really good? Talent, right? Like guy with ball puts ball in basket. And you don't really have to have this highly connected offense to score points. Like it's better if you are, like, for sure, 5 guys working together, moving the ball, all that. But at the end of the day, like, players are so talented now, you can score points without some of that. So, he's banking on the fact that their talent and their recruiting of player acquisition is going to get them there. But their recruiting of recruit everyone every day and being disconnected is why your defense is horrid. You can't out talent somebody on the defensive end. That does take a much more connected side, I think, anyway. And so if you think about why they're going 0-3 after winning back-to-back national championships, is it possible that some of that attention to detail, some of those basics, getting back to the quote unquote fundamentals, again, and this is not closeouts. UConn going into the gym the next day and doing Vegas closeouts for 30 minutes or defensive slides is not going to fix their issues. They are disconnected on the defensive end. They are not recruiting each other and staying that way on that end of the floor. And I feel like that right there is going to have a lot more to do with an 0-3 start and why we're not going to play in an MTE anymore.
So I want to raise this point to you and see what you think about this. So we have railed against this fake coach speak, fake fundamental phrase of defense wins championships. I'm willing to reconsider this based on what you just said. Defense does take five players being connected, right? It does take the relationship. It does take trust. It does take all of those things. Vegas closeouts isn't winning us championships. Our connectedness, aka how well we could potentially defend based on how connected we are as a unit, that will win us a championship or get us close. Therein, defense might win championships, but it's not the scheming of defense like people would think it is. It is the connectedness that leads to an executed scheme of that defense.
Yeah, because it's not the tippity top part of the pyramid of the defense. It's the foundation part, right? So defense may win championships, but defense is a byproduct of that connection. So therefore, it's not defense wins championships. It's not offense wins championships. It's not offensive field goal, effective field goal percentage. It's connectedness wins championships. Connectedness, character, climate, and culture wins championships. And when you've got talent and you can do all those things, talent is great. And I feel like talent is a lot of times we as coach speak, we say things to get the job or to win, and we downplay what the importance of talent is. Like, talent is important. And if you have it, you can get by with a lot, especially if a lot of talent plays a little talent. You don't have to have a ton of character, but all things then being considered, or as you move through your football playoffs right now in Louisiana, right? Like, it's semifinal week here in Louisiana. You're trying to get back. Ruston High right now is in the semifinals, trying to go back-to-back state champs. And I think a lot of times we try to diminish like what talent can do for you, but connected talent, that's when you go from good to great or great to elite, or, and you enter into that special territory. And I think we need to make a shirt that says defense doesn't win championships, connection wins championships. Like that may be a blog post or an episode or something like that I think we could dive into a little bit more. Because again, it's not the top of the pyramid that's winning the championship. It's not the technical tactical. There are certain adjustments and certain things that you can do to scheme up, and there are more appropriate offenses than others. And, a 3-man front versus a 5-man front and what you're doing and all this and that. But even when you break it down, your quarterback recognizing that front has shifted and that there is numbers on the right versus the left, it comes down to his decision and his training and his awareness and his reflection and his reactivity and his character in making the next best decision that makes that play work or not work. It's usually not the play that's dialed up. It's the execution of it.
Right.
And what is involved in the execution of a play? It's a number of decisions. And we typically want to go back to the technique that we repped over and over again. When you can't replicate, 20,000 screaming fans in a state championship game in practice, and so I think, again, as coaches, we say these things because they sound good and we want to get back to the fundamentals. But what are fundamentals? It's not closeouts and defensive slides or 3-on-2, 2-on-1, or going and shooting more free throws in an empty gym. There's value and there's places for some of that at some particular time. But us getting back to fundamentals would be the human component. It would be the connection. It would be figuring out if we've got a lack of connection, then we've got a communication issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And communication is the root of all evil, but it also solves everything.
Right.
And so if there is a connection issue, then invariably there is a communication issue. And if there's, or a trust issue or a respect issue. So if we go 0-3 in the Maui, we don't need to go back and go, okay, well, our rotations were bad and we weren't, we should have 3/4 the post instead of played from behind, or we should have played more zone or played more man. No, we need to get back to trust, respect, communication, and character,
Mm-hmm.
because that's ultimately what's going to fix your defense.
Right. And I do think too, like multiple things can be true at the same time. Like we should have 3/4 the post.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's an adjustment that we can make as a coaching staff. But the adjustment to make people trust one another, like we can't make that adjustment as a coaching staff. That
Not
is
at
an
halftime,
all
baby.
in, right? Like that's everybody has to make that adjustment, right? And like that gets me to what we did with Adrian Lewis the other day. In going through the foxhole test and like explaining that whole thing. And he's got, I'm not going to put all their business out there, but he's got some personality issues on his team, and just meshing and all of that stuff. And like it's a relatively new season for them, and he was looking for a way of delineating captaincy and leadership. And like you and I have a very different view, I think, from most people and coaches about the need for captains and stuff. But he was going to do it. So like, hey, we'll help you out with that. Why don't we try the foxhole test? And I got a chance to catch up with Adrian yesterday. He called me before practice, or like, I don't know, on his lunch, because he's 3 hours behind. He's over there in Oregon. And, we talked about how it went. And he was like, man, the way that this like shook out, number one, like I'm happy with the way that this shook out, because it was the top 2 kids were the kids that I thought should get votes, but I didn't think would if we did it in a traditional way.
Mm.
And I was like, right there, right? Like maybe that's, some sort of like outcome bias or something, but like if that's what you're picking up from that, that's awesome. That the kids took it as, okay, let me take this seriously and not vote for my buddy or who I think should have it, but who I would really trust, who would I really connect with and know that would have my back. Right. And so then like he's a math teacher. So we went through some of the statistical piece of this of like, all right, well, how many kids got the top vote, right? Or like got written on that back line that's worth 3 points or whatever. Right. And he was like, well, this one kid, and there's 14 people on his team, this one kid got that line 8 times. And it's like, bro, like if 8 out of 14 kids on your team are like, yes, this is the kid that we trust, boom, right? You're good. Especially if you agree with that as the coach, because you have a pulse on the team and all of that. And he, the second place kid, very similar. And then the third place was a kid who has leadership potential, but still needs to learn. And I was like, think about the conversation that you can have with this kid now to say, hey, your time is coming, and here's where your teammates believe in you. We believe in your ability, and we're going to need you from next year onwards to lead in the same way and like hopefully get the same types of feedback from your team that these other 2 kids got. And we're going to have you shadow those kids as preparation for that. And like, think about the power in that conversation. Think about the power in the conversation with the freshman who got double-digit points on that exercise. You got a freshman who got, like, I think he said 10 or 11 points, and the highest was 24. Right? So all that to say, we don't need to not play in MTEs again. We got to figure out who the foxhole guys are.
Yeah.
We got to figure out, and like, this is what coach speak, right? We want everyday guys. We want foxhole guys, whatever. How do you develop that? It doesn't just happen. It happens through intentionality in maintaining and like upgrading the human component and the commitment to each other as people. And when that trust is there, really, really great things can happen. And like, I'll even speak on my previous experience at Worcester Academy. I think the statute of limitations has passed. They've already started a new season, right? We had arguably one of the most talented rosters I've definitely ever had, but also like in the entire NEPSAC, one of the most talented rosters that existed. We went 19-5, right? We won, but when it came to crunch time, when it came to tournament play, our team internally had fallen apart. And there was a complete lack of trust, right? And that was not something we were going to be able to salvage with 3, 4, 5 days left in the season. My assistant and I, we tried, right? We had multiple meetings. We talked to the kids individually. We were working. I mean, we worked our asses off to try to figure it out. But at the end of the day, if there's not a commitment from the players, just, speaking on my experience, you've had this experience on teams that you've coached, right? UConn may be having this experience. We're just kind of using them as the example. The commitment has to be there from everyone in the organization. And if it's not, then you know who's got to go. And hopefully you're empowered to be able to do that wherever you are.
Yeah, that's great. We've got, I think, like 10, 12 minutes left here. I want to go back to something else you said and dive into this a little bit more. Talking about Layden and teaching, and typically we don't think of like, what if we paid teachers as CEOs, as a leader of an organization and that kind of realm. And so if we view teaching as leadership, you think back to education, learning how to be an educator, like going to school to go to school, and think about all the classes that we took, right? And every teacher out there right now is kind of rolling their eyes like, yeah, there was none of that, like quote unquote educational leadership, which means I learned how to play the game to get my school points so we can become an A school, or like whatever your state system is, right? And in college, you take these classroom management classes, and classroom management is very much, at least the way I always experienced it. So if somebody else has a different go at it, I'd love to hear about it. But classroom management means classroom compliance. Classroom management means orderly procedures, which there's nothing wrong with orderly procedures and having a system and a plan, and you're trying to get 30 plus kids in a room that don't want to be there, to shut up and listen and go about your day. Like, there is value again in a lot of that, but that's what management is. That's not classroom leadership. That's not classroom influence. We're not taking the brand backwards, but we're not moving the brand forward. It's not that we're not learning, but it's also not that we are learning, right? Like, we're just trying to get through and drudge through our day. And I just wonder, with a few minutes left here, like, what if in education we reframe some of this stuff and classroom management was taught in a way to actually lead and inspire and influence people, and it was classroom leadership or classroom influence versus I need compliance and management because I'm tired and I have a headache and I got to grade papers and we had a game last night and I just need you to shut up and listen and, do what you're going to do. And the principal's coming today, so I need everybody to be on their best behavior just so we can sort of pretend to play this game. I just, again, if you kind of run with it, Asim, because I know you got thoughts on it, but I just feel like we're missing a huge opportunity there with the next group and wave of teachers by kind of doing the same old thing that we've always done.
So I might throw this back to you with this question. What are we measuring right now as opposed to what would be measured if we treated it as classroom leadership?
I mean, we're measuring referrals, we're measuring detentions, we're measuring tardies, we're measuring, attendance and truancy, and then we're measuring these test scores.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even here locally, like Lincoln Parish was an A school again. Like, the leadership here does a good job, making them prepare, blah, blah, blah. But they went back like a half a point. And so there was this big to-do at the school board meeting yesterday because some politician was going crazy over, well, why did y'all go back ahead? And it's like, man, we've been progressing every year.
Right.
And, at some point you can't there's going to be some backslide, but we're so focused on this number. And the people in those classrooms, those teachers, those students, kids with disabilities, kids that have rough home lives, kids that do what they're supposed to do, and are that type of kid. Like, they're not a number, man.
Mhm.
Like, and every school is different. You're trying to balance the nuances of this, and there's leadership changes and principles, and it's so dynamic, so chaotic that you're having to deal with all this, that we try to boil it down to this one particular number. And I mean, I don't know what exactly you measure, because everybody needs some sort of data, but that's why I love more open-ended first person data.
Mhm.
A teacher leaves a school, or a coach gets another job, and the organic nature and of unsolicited handwritten notes by students going to that teacher or that coach or that principal or that person. Kids don't write notes,
Nope.
but they will for a teacher they love when they
Mhm.
lose them. All of a sudden they become like Mark Twain, and
Yeah.
we don't measure that kind of stuff.
Well, so my wife teaches second grade, right? And she's been at this school now for this is her 5th year at this school because we moved up here in 2019. So she has kids who are now in middle school who come to pick up their younger sibling at the elementary school and still run over to her and give her a hug. And that kid was the biggest pain in her ass when they were in second grade or in 5th grade when she taught 5th grade first. So I say all that to say, like, leadership doesn't always show its results on a year to year basis. It shows its results on a multi year lifetime basis. And I think that that's really hard to measure, right? We wouldn't have a metric for that
No
that
doubt.
we could say, like, Kyle was a highly qualified, highly impactful teacher because he got 10 handwritten notes a day. But I do think we need to enable teachers to be professionals at being human beings first. And when we have put the focus, and this is, you can go back to policy and stuff on this with No Child Left Behind, ESSA, stuff like that. Like, when the focus became whether people were passing tests, whether we were meeting the metrics that were laid out by the state of, you know, X amount of kids not being tardy or X amount of suspensions. Like, you can't suspend kids anymore. Like, well, what happens in society when you aren't following the rules of society? You get put away or you
You
get
get suspended.
reprimanded for that, right? Like, you get suspended from participation in society, and that's okay. Like, it has to be okay,
Mhm.
right? Because by and large, the majority of people want to do the right thing. And they want to be, as we started this conversation, they want to be neighborly. They know that those things are important. But when it over and over again, there is no consequence. And the majority of attention is paid to the people who aren't doing things the right way. And they get sent back to class with a lollipop, right? And they get to go to the PBIS thing because, well, we can't exclude them. No, like, you can, because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, right? So you render all of these, like, classroom management things
Mhm.
completely, like, inept, right? You render them useless because you're not holding the line on what actually matters. And thus you're showing that you don't trust your teachers. I mean, how many times did you and I, when we were teachers and the people that we talk to on a daily basis, we've had the same conversations for years about this stuff, where by and large, like, unless my classroom runs a certain way, I'm never going to get through to what these kids need. And yet, everyone that we are in contact with, I can guarantee you, everyone that we're in contact with that still teaches can get kids to put their phones away, can move student outcomes into a positive, can show growth amongst all their students. Even their highest level students are being challenged appropriately. And yet, we don't lean into conversations with those people to say, hey, how are you doing that?
Mhm.
Like, I had an administrator come into my room one time and there was a pile of cell phones on a desk in the middle of the room. and we were watching Shark Tank. And he pulled me aside and he was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "Oh, it's Shark Tank Friday." And he's like, "Well, why are there phones in the middle of the desk? Like, nobody's on a phone right now. This is incredible." I said, "Is it? Like, it shouldn't be incredible." All I said was, "If anybody gets on their phone, we're going to go back to lecture. Y'all put them in the middle of the room. If anybody even reaches for it, we're going to go back to lecture." And that created positive peer pressure to where they literally physically held a kid back from touching his phone so that they could continue to watch Shark Tank on Friday. I didn't coerce my class into doing that. We had good enough relationships in that class to where it was like, "Hey, you know what? For the greater good, let's do this because I don't want to spend my Friday having a lecture and I know you don't want to listen to it." Did that move our results? I don't know, man. That whole class got 4s and 5s on the AP microeconomics exam. So I would say we did pretty damn good.
Right.
But the metric was we got 21 kids to put their phones in the middle of the room and actually engage with what was going on the screen and engage with each other in a positive way and not be distracted. I'm not saying it'll work for everybody, but like those are the types of things we got to be able to do, not how many kids got below passing on a particular state assessment that was made to cater to the low middle of the state. We can adequately challenge every student in our classroom if we're given the time, the resources, and the trust. And generally, none of those three things exist.
More specifically, the trust.
Yeah.
Because we'll give you time, we'll give you an extra period, or we'll give you Chromebooks, or we'll give you another curriculum, but it's the trust that's there. And I think to kind of end and wrap this up, what we're talking about now is we're hitting the bullseye of the wrong target. And,
Yep.
I've talked about this and my frustration. I love teaching. I hated education.
Mm-hmm.
When I teach 2 years at Simsboro High School in the state of Louisiana, and 92% of my minority students, we had a very big African American and Latino population. 92% of all of my kids and 95% of my uh, African American and Latino students pass their U.S. history EOC, which they don't care anything about because nobody's going to college and they're all going to go work the pipeline and the farm and blah, blah, blah. And I get rated as an ineffective teacher because they didn't pass by enough.
Mm-hmm.
They passed basic, but they weren't quote unquote mastery.
Right.
I get put into a system that says I'm an ineffective teacher. You've lost me.
While you were probably the most influential and effective teacher they may have ever had.
I'm not doing it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That was the feedback that I'm getting, is that this is not, I can go influence people's lives in a different way and not constantly be told I suck at my job.
Right.
While overachieving. Right. And I'm getting to run into those kids now. And again, I've mentioned this recently, like bumping into some of those students. They don't talk about the EOC. They don't talk about Manifest Destiny. They don't talk about the great big new deal. They don't talk. I just enjoyed being in your class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been 5+ years from now. So like you said, we don't have that data in real time, but we don't trust the fact that we can get those results later. And I think that's probably where a big part of that issue arises, is that we, in such a society, we need things now. We have a really hard time trusting the process, even though we all say trust the process. We don't know what the process is. We don't know thyself enough. And then we're all trying to sit here and get the next job or the next promotion or the next this and that we can't trust the fact that what we're doing may actually work further down the road.